everyone, it's me again. Now we're on episode 3, mechanics. This is probably going to be a long one. There's a bit to digest here. So first I'm going to start with what I call the core engine, the basic core mechanics of this game and how you play it. Everything is resolved, all conflicts, issues, problems, combat, anything your character has to do that can't be solved through roleplay alone is done using rock, paper, scissors. So that's, the basic childhood game. Rock beats scissors, scissors beats paper, paper beats rock. When you have to throw a challenge, you throw rock, paper, scissors. And whoever wins that outcome wins that initial, what we call challenge. So that's the very basics of the system. Everything revolves around that. And I'll get into a bit more details about that, but I kind of wanted to cover that as the basic core of what drives the game when conflict resolution needs to happen. More importantly, you need to learn how to make a character. Making a character is kind of your first step before we really delve into mechanics. And again, this is just going to focus on Vampire. All of the other game lines have their own character creation rules and history and all of that. That would take many more episodes than the 10 I've got planned. So let's start with how to make a character. To make a character, the first thing you kind of want to do is decide who this person was in life. It can be anything. Be as creative as you like. Were they a doctor, a police officer, a student, anything. What was their home life like? How were they raised? And then more importantly, how did they die? How did they become a vampire? Who is their sire, the one who created them? What is their relationship like? What kind of quirks does your character have? What do they like and dislike? Try to flesh them out as much as you can to like making a three-dimensional real person would. Everybody has their own individual tics and things that they like and don't like. Try to flesh that as much as you can. Honestly, one of the hardest parts can be come up with a name for the character. Feel free to be as diverse as you like in character creation. Work with the storyteller to help fit it into the game and the existing stories that are happening. That's really the first important part you want to focus on before getting to the nuts and bolts of the system. But once you figure that all out, the story of who you were, who you are, you want to again decide what clan your character is. Figure out, work again with the storyteller, what type of game they're running, what clans are allowed. For example, a Camarilla game is probably not going to allow the Sabbat clans of the Tzimisce and the La Sombra. But the core 7 or so Camarilla clans will probably be allowed. So find out what type of game is being run and ask the storyteller what clans are available to play. And then pick one of those, one of the 13. You can, of course, ask to play a bloodline, but that's more difficult. They're rarer, and that's got more steps involved to that. Once you pick the clan and work with the storyteller, next you got to kind of figure out what generation your character is going to be. How many steps removed from Cain you are. The player limit to this is 8th generation. It is the lowest that a character can be before becoming an NPC, meaning you're no longer a player character. You're now a tool of the staff for story. You don't get to play it regularly, things like that. So a lot of games won't let you start at 8th generation. Some will. It varies from game to game, but again, you want to work with the storytellers to what generation your character is, because that's an important factor. Now, I'm going to crack open the Laws of the Night book here, which will kind of give us a brief rundown of character creation. So there's a little handy chart for this on page 62 of Laws of the Night, revised. So we'll just go by it step by step. Next, we want to choose our nature and demeanor. What is that? They don't come into play that often, but nature is who your character is really deep down. They're your defining characteristic. Do you defend the weak? Do you care only about yourself? Do you like to teach others? Things like that. And it's the true nature of who you are. Demeanor is the face you show the world. Sometimes this is the same exact as your nature, but a lot of times it's not. But the same kind of idea. It's just who do you present yourself as to the world. Next, you're going to want to pick a morality path. We'll go into that in a little bit detailed later. But for the most part, for a starting character, you're probably going to be on humanity. Next, you're going to choose your attributes. Attributes come in 3 categories. physical, mental, and social, and they are pretty much what they sound like. I always recommend, for simplification, in these attributes, you can take any number of the listed attributes in any combination you want up to a certain maximum. I don't recommend doing that just because there's a simpler way to do it, and I prefer tabletop. In tabletop, your attributes are broken down under those 3 categories into 3 subcategories underneath them. For example, under physical, it's strength, dexterity, stamina. Strength is how strong you are, dexterity is how dexterous you are, stamina is how tough you are. There are corresponding attribute traits to those categories in the book, and I recommend just keeping it simple to those 3. For example, my characters for strength, I always use brawny for my strength attribute, dexterous for my dexterity attribute, and resilient for my stamina attribute. And you can do the same for mental and social as well. Mental is broken down into intelligence, wits, and perception-related traits. Social is broken down into appearance-related, charisma-related, and manipulation-related. I would just recommend doing that. You don't have to. You can pick whatever attributes you like. You start off with 7, 5, and 3 among the 3 categories. So you put 7 in one, 5 in another, 3 in another after that. You can break those up however you like, but it has to be 7, 5, and then 3. And again, you can pick whatever trait you like. I just strongly recommend going with the 3 subcategory. It makes it much simpler, but it's up to you. After that, you're going to choose 5 abilities. Abilities, again, found laws of the night revised. A lot of disciplines use abilities for retests. You expend temporary levels of an ability rating to retest, and we'll get into what retests are in a moment. But they're an economy of expend, get a thing. And storytellers will often call for tests related to an ability, and you need that ability to throw the challenge. That's the rock, paper, scissors system again. So you get 5 of those, and your clan, depending on which one you pick, will tell you a clan advantage. A lot of clans get an additional ability or an additional background, which we'll cover in a moment. You want to look at what those things are. Your disadvantages or clan weakness also can affect that as well, so make sure to read those. Next, if you're playing anything but a Sabbat vampire, you will gain 3 basic disciplines. Every clan has what we call 3 in-clan disciplines. These are your supernatural powers. Looking for what those are, kind of look them up, review them for which ones you like, which ones you don't like, but you get 3 basic levels. Disciplines come in basic, intermediate, and advanced. You can just choose which one you like among those 3. If you're Sabbat, you gain 4 instead of 3. Again, for anything but a Sabbat character, you next will get 5 backgrounds. Backgrounds represent ties to the world. Things like retainers, these are servants. Resources, which is money, allies, people you can call on, contacts. This is also where you will have to put points into the generation background to be whatever generation you want to be. Again, all vampires except Sabbat gain 5 of these. Sabbat gain none. They get 0 ties. And then lastly, you want to assign your blood traits. Blood traits are how much blood is in your vampiric body and how much of those you can spend at a time. This is determined by your generation. Make sure to check the generation chart. It'll tell you exactly how many of those you get. Same with willpower traits. Willpower traits will be used for various things. We'll cover that in a bit, but your generation will tell you how many willpower traits you have. Next, you're going to assign your virtue traits. Virtue traits are used to determine when your character would frenzy, your loss to connection to your morality. Again, we're just going to assume humanity for starting. It's the easiest one. You will get, as long as you have the common virtues, which are conscience, self-control, and courage, you gain a free dot in those. And then you get 7 traits to spread among those 3 however you like. Next, you can choose what's called negative traits. Associated with your attributes are negative traits, things like being slow or clumsy or callous and rude. These are negative traits. Each one of those will get you 1 free point to spend at character creation. You can take a max of 5 of those. The downside to them is if another character or storyteller knows what your negative trait is, they can call it in an applicable challenge, and then you have to bid an additional trait. And we'll get into bidding traits in a moment. Lastly, you can then choose to take a derangement if you want. Think of this like a sanity meter from Call of Cthulhu. Get 2 free points if you decide to take one of those. You also, just for free, get 5 freebie points that you can then spend. And lastly, you can also drop your morality rating by 1 for an additional 2 points if you want to. You can also take up to 7 points in flaws. These are actually things that are detrimental to your character and get a corresponding number of points, so 7 there. Your max total that you can get is 21 from most games. Some games limit that to 19, so you want to check with their house rules and the storyteller the amount that they particularly allow. And that's kind of the basics of character creation. Once you have those freebie points, you would go ahead and look on page 124 of Laws of the Night tells you how much things cost. So if you want to buy another attribute, a new ability, new backgrounds, new disciplines, all of these things you can do with those freebie points that you gain. And a lot of storytellers also allow you to write a story for your character and get more points. One Roll by Night in itself allows up to an additional 60 points that you can gain at character creation to spend on your character how you like. So we're going to go back to attributes. Attributes will have a cap depending on your generation. So for example, an 8th generation vampire has an attribute cap of 14. That's the maximum amount of traits you can have in like physical, social, and mental. You can have a 14. Each one of those costs 1 XP apiece to raise above the 753 that we talked about earlier. Abilities are all 1 XP a piece. They can be up to 5 levels in every ability you want. Backgrounds are 1 XP each. Merits are the cost of the merit is listed. If you buy it after character creation, it's double the cost. Abilities allow for what's called a specialization. You can get one of those. You spend 1 XP and you pick, like, for example, in melee, I want to be really good with swords. So you pick specialization in swords. This is going to give you a bonus trait, any challenges related to when using a sword. You can do that for every single ability. You can buy up your morality. You can buy new discipline levels if you want. Basics are 3, intermediate are 6, and advanced are 9. If they're in clan for you, that's the core 3 associated with every clan we talked about. If they're out of clan, it's 4, 7, 10. And you can't ever go above advanced level in a discipline. Blood magic is its own thing. If you're not playing a clan that gets blood magic in clan, like a Tremere, you don't really have to worry about it. That's something you can cross down the line. So that kind of covers the basics of how to make a character. One of the things we kind of got to talk about now, going back to the core system, is, well, how does that work? So when your character wants to enter into a challenge, say you want to punch another character, you have to name the physical trait that would be appropriate to it. Like my character, again, going back to the 3 subcategories I recommended, my character is dexterous enough to hit you. The responding person would then say, well, my character is resilient enough to not feel that punch. And then you would throw a game of rock, paper, scissors. If you both throw the same symbol, it's what's called a tie. When there's a tie, you have to compare your traits. This is your attribute trait. So if you're an 8th generation vampire with 14 physical traits, you would say, I have 14. And say the guy you're fighting is a 9th generation vampire who has a 13 cap, and he would say 13. So since you have 14, you would win that challenge. That's the basics of it. Now that challenge is lost, the loser has an opportunity to do what's called a retest. Remember those abilities I mentioned earlier? That individual who didn't want to get hit could say, I want to spend the survival ability for a retest, basically to throw rock, paper, scissors again. The person who won the challenge can decide, yeah, I'm okay with letting that happen, let's throw it again, or they can spend an appropriate ability to cancel that retest, meaning it doesn't happen, saying, no, you don't get a retest. So in that case, you would say, I'm going to use Brawl and cancel your ability to use a retest. And then the challenge is considered done. I would have punched the individual. There are a variety of merits and powers that grant retests. For example, Potence 2, called Might, gives you a retest that cannot be canceled, but it is the last retest you may throw in physical strength-related challenges. Climbing, punching, fighting, that sort of thing. And you want to look into each power as to if it has an additional kind of retest. And there's a lot of them out there. Some magic items can grant retests, all sorts of things. And generally speaking, the only thing that can be canceled is an ability. Abilities can cancel abilities. Some games allow what we call like to cancel like. So if we were in an applicable challenge and I declared Might and you declared Might because we were hitting each other at the same time, Some games allow you to cancel that. Check with the storytellers about how canceling retests work and what retests are allowed. Some limit how many retests may be called in a challenge. It's all important things to know over the house rules, and work with the storytellers to kind of figure out what those variations are. But that's the basics of it. When everyone says a retest, what they mean is they are calling a retest. Players are often quick to go through these challenges, but they're supposed to be telling you what their character is doing, the trait that they are bidding, and the retest they are calling on. They also should tell you what bonuses from, be it other powers, items, the variety of things in the game that are helping them increase their trait total, which leads us to bonus traits. Some disciplines grant bonus traits, items grant bonus traits, merits can grant bonus traits. What are bonus traits? Bonus traits are an additional number you add when you tie in a challenge, when you both throw the same symbol. So again, back to my example of the combat of one character, the 8th generation vampire, punching the 9th generation vampire. Let's say instead he was using a sword, a broadsword. That broadsword gives him 3 additional traits. So he's no longer bidding 14. Okay, he's now bidding 17 traits versus the 13 traits of the defender, because he doesn't have anything that gives him a bonus related to that. Players should be declaring what they're getting their bonuses from. And again, some powers grant bonus traits, merits grant bonus traits. You kind of want to shop and look through those. Ask your fellow players, what your character wants to be good at. How can I get bonus traits and retests related to that? Because the core driving factor of the engine is traits and retests. And there's many, many, many ways to get those things. And your fellow players should be able to give you tips and tricks for your game on how to get those things. Next, we've got blood and willpower. Blood is obviously what it sounds like. It's a vampire's whole power source. It drives almost all of their powers. Their disciplines will tell you their cost, if they have one, of blood that you need to spend in order to do it. You can also spend 1 blood to heal what's called lethal or bashing damage when your character takes those. You can spend blood traits to increase your physical traits for a certain limited amount of time. If it's over your generational maximum, which again, we use the example of the 8th generation vampire. So if you have 14 physical traits and you spend 1 blood for 1 physical, which would put you at 15, that lasts for only a single challenge. If you were an 8th generation vampire and say had 13 traits, because you just didn't buy up to 14 and you spent 1 blood, to put you at 14, that blood trait would last for the whole combat that you're in instead. So anything above generation, 1 challenge, anything below generation for the whole combat. That's kind of how that covers that. And that's the basics of blood. How much blood you can spend in what's called a round of combat, or basically 3 seconds, is determined by your generation. Everything above 9th generation is 1. 9 you can spend, at 9th generation you can spend 2, and at 8th generation you can spend 3. And that's the limit on PCs. There are some powers and merits that can affect that, but you kind of want to, avoid those things until you want to get into more complexities of the system. Next, you have your disciplines. These are the magic supernatural powers all vampires have. Like I had mentioned earlier, all clans get 3 of those in clan for them. These are the innate powers to them. We have what's called the core 8. These aren't unique to any one clan. Anyone, in theory, can get them much more commonly. Think of them more like common disciplines than rare disciplines, which are called clan-specific disciplines. Some clans have their own unique powers, which are harder to get. I'll kind of go over them in brief. And I'm going to go over the core 8 first. Animalism is the ability to mess with another vampire's beast, or mess around with animals, talk to animals, control animals, things like that. Auspex is things more psychically related, like the ability to heighten all of your senses, read the aura of another, mentally talk to someone through telepathy, or project your consciousness into the ether, things like that. Celerity is super speed. Dominate is mind control, the ability to subvert the will of another and make them do as you desire. Fortitude is supernatural resistance, the ability to take blows, gunshots, punches, things like that, make you tougher. Obfuscate, the ability to make others not look at you, to hide yourself, to blend into a crowd, change your appearance, things like that. Potence is super strength, pretty straightforward. Presence is emotion manipulation. Get people to like you, hate you, not want to attack you. That pretty much covers presence. And then that basically covers the core 8. Now, the more rare disciplines, I'm not going to get into the bloodline disciplines, but clan-specific disciplines, you have Symmetry, which is the ability to create illusions. Dementation is the ability to drive people mad and the power of the madness of the Malkavians. Obtenebration, which is the ability of the Lasombra, is related to controlling shadows and darkness. Protean, which is the discipline of the Gangrel, is much more your classic vampire mythos stuff. You can get claws, turn into a bat and a wolf, meld into the dirt, turn into a mist, stuff like that. Shape changing, really. Quietus is the power of the Assamites. It's all related to blood manipulation and assassinations, things like that. Serpentis is the power of the followers of Set. It allows them to gain aspects of a snake, things like skin of the adder, turn into a snake, the mesmerizing eyes of a snake, things like that. And then lastly, you're going to have Vicissitude of the Tzimisce. This is the ability to meld and change flesh and bone and really kind of mess with that stuff or take the terrifying horrid form that they have. Their beast brought forward, physically reflected, and they gain really powerful abilities in combat. So besides those major disciplines of the clans, you have individualized, specialized disciplines of bloodlines. These are exceedingly rare and can be hard to get. You kind of have to find a member of that bloodline to be able to teach it to you. There's a few of those. They all do a variety of specialized things. So if you're interested in those, take a look at those on the White Wolf Wiki is what I would recommend. They give you a brief synopsis of kind of what they do. Besides disciplines, this is something you'll get into further later on. It's called combination disciplines. These are special, unique, kind of one-shot powers that require two or more disciplines in order to access them, and they have their own XP cost. For example, the Bruja have a combination discipline called Ironheart, which requires potence and presence at certain levels, and if you have those, you can then spend the XP, assuming you have a teacher that can teach you this ability, to gain its power, which gives you what's called ties, meaning when you throw rock, paper, scissors, you automatically win on the tie when defending against the discipline powers of Dominate, Presence, and Mind-Altering Thaumaturgy. So each discipline has its own individual level. Combination discipline is like having, it does an additional thing for a cost, and it does only this thing. So there are a lot of combination disciplines. Some are specific to clans, some to sect, some to various factions. Only they can access them. Not all combination disciplines are allowed for everyone or easy to get. Definitely something to talk to your storyteller about. When it comes to morality, next, what we covered, the basic is humanity, how tied to you remembering being mortal. Most characters will be on humanity, unless they're Sabbat. A lot of Sabbat characters are on what's called the Paths of Enlightenment. These are alternative worldviews to humanity. So humanity is very much, don't kill people, don't break stuff, don't steal. And when you do those things, you have to throw challenges to see if you lose levels of your humanity or morality. The Paths of Enlightenment have different, what's called sins. There'll be 5 of them for each, and anytime you do the thing it says you can't do, you got to throw a challenge for it. It's the basics of it. Having low morality means that you wake up later when the sun goes down, you have difficulties operating during the day, and ultimately if your character reaches 0 morality, you enter into a state called wassail. Your character permanently frenzies, you lose your character, it's game over. So morality is an important scale. You can only raise it generally through roleplay and storyteller approval. So you want to work with them if you want to increase your morality. Every storyteller has different guidelines. If you're really interested in morality and the systems and kind of the deep philosophy of it, I definitely recommend the book Chaining the Beast. It's probably the best one they wrote in regards to the nature of the relationship between a beast and the vampire and morality and all of that. So after morality, I want to cover next is diablerie. Diablerie is consuming the soul of another vampire for their power. This is one of the only ways to decrease your generation. If you subdue a vampire and consume their soul, and they were lower generation than you will go down a level in generation. Diablerie in the Camarilla is viewed as pretty much the most horrific crime you can commit, and if you get caught, you can get killed for it. And the Sabbat, they're pretty much embrace it at all times, and are kind of the only sect, besides Assamites, that are really all about Diablerie. So besides the benefits of getting Generation, you can also gain 2 XP for committing the act. However, there's a couple of bad things. You will immediately lose a level of your morality rating for doing this. No challenge, you just automatically lose it. Unless your path of morality specifically says Diablerie is okay. And there are a few that do. If it doesn't, you automatically lose 1. If you decided to torture the person or do other horrific things to them before you ate them or during the Diablerie, the storyteller can just decide you lose 2 morality traits and not 1, so be mindful of that. Additionally, your aura, thing that people with Auspex can view, will have black veins in it and show that you've committed this crime for a certain period of time, and certain powers of blood magic are always able to detect it as well. So be mindful that there's some significant downsides to that. There's also mysterious rumors that it's exceptionally ancient and potent vampires who get their souls consumed by ones too young can take over the body. There are some stories, and there are even some mechanics for this, so be mindful of that as well. Lastly, we have what's called the Blood Bond. Blood Bond is the power of a vampire's blood. If you as a character drink the blood of another vampire 3 times, you are enslaved to them. You have to follow their commands, you love them completely, and are just completely enslaved to them. Drinking once is pretty bad, you like them a little more. 2 is you like them a lot, and then 3 is, you like them forever. Beyond that, blood bonds, the Sabbat has their own system called the Voldery. If you have a vinculum, which is the result of partaking in the Voldery, it is basically a 3-point blood bond spread among multiple individuals instead of 1 individual. You can only ever have 1 3-point blood bond to 1 person ever. Blood bonds can decrease if, not vinculum though, just blood bonds, can decrease over time if you avoid the person for 1 month, or 12 months, minus your permanent willpower rating. So if you have a 12 permanent willpower rating because you're 8th generation and you have a 3-point blood bond to someone else and you avoid them for 1 month, you can reduce that 3-point to a 2-point, so on and so forth. There are other mystical ways to break blood bonds. In fact, the Voldery can do that itself. But it's generally viewed in the Camarilla as a common punishment to be made to drink the blood of another vampire when you mess up. So you definitely want to try to avoid those, but it does happen. Next, in the core mechanics, you want to talk about is item cards. Item cards are what they sound like. They are index cards that detail any item your character might have or need that comes up. This can be from weapons to computers to magical artifacts, anything in between. There are various powers and disciplines that create magic items that do an effect. Item cards will detail what bonuses, mechanics, or anything else of what the item is on it. So basically all you need is the item card. You can read it and tell you what it does. And again, if an item grants bonus traits, it'll tell you what those bonus traits are, and they apply when you're using that item. A lot of characters have a lot of item cards, just kind of the nature of One World at this point. And the scope of what kind of items are allowed in a game is something you, again, want to ask the storyteller of the game you're going to. Some games are very heavy on magic items and like them a lot. My game, for example, does not have a lot of magic items. We're not a very magic item heavy game. So we tend to rely on, instead of crazy out there specialized mechanics, of your magic item gives you bonus traits. That's kind of what we rely on. So again, check with your storytellers to what kind of item cards are allowed in the game or what items your character starts with. This includes armor, weapons, anything your character needs and could reasonably have. And then lastly, we have custom content. Custom content is mechanics, powers, abilities, merits, anything that goes on your character sheet that isn't from a White Wolf book. This can be custom combination disciplines, custom blood magic rituals, custom paths, like I said, custom merits, anything that you want your character to feel unique and special that they're doing, and there's not a mechanic to represent it. You can work with your storyteller to help craft and create. Custom content generally can't be learned by another character unless you, the creator, say it's okay, generally speaking. So there's a variety of custom content out there. On the OWBN Roll by Night website, there is a custom content database where you can look at everything that's been logged for custom content to kind of get you an idea. Some games are very heavy on custom content. Some games don't allow custom content. So again, check with the storyteller of the game you're visiting and based on what their stance and policy on custom content is. And then lastly, overall, just try to remember to have fun with the mechanics. They can seem overwhelming and complex, but your fellow players and storytellers should be happy to help you out. Remember the core engine. It's just a game of rock, paper, scissors. Ultimately, it's how many traits you bid and how many retests you have in the challenge that you're going for. That's really the basics of it. So that's the math you got to know, is what are my retests, what am I bidding on this challenge? Ask what your game's caps are and for what characters can bid. A lot of games put a cap on, regardless of opponent's traits, the max you can bid is 30. Some games have higher, some games have lower. You want to check what those caps are. It's not an unlimited tier, generally speaking. So definitely keep that in mind. Retests are immensely an important resource that I highly recommend getting as many of those as possible. They help, reflect your better ability to do something as a character. So that's the basics of the mechanics system that we use for One Roll by Night and the LARP engine. By Night Studios uses a completely different system. I'm not going to review those. I don't really play in those. I don't know it as well. So I would recommend speaking to those that do. But hopefully this was helpful. I'll see you guys next in episode 4, Packets.